Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Donald Miyazaki. I'm the Executive Director of the ALS Society of BC, and very proud to welcome you all, most of you, back to the ALS BC Patient Information Webinar Series. Big thank you to Tanabe Pharma Canada for their support in allowing us to have these webinars. As a reminder, they are being recorded, and we do have an archive that we in a library that we are publishing at alsbc.ca for you to view at any time. We also, just as a little bit of housekeeping, do have a question and answer box that if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to type the questions in. We'll keep an eye and we'll ask those questions. Our speaker today has requested, she said, I'm happy to be interrupted just because she may be jumping around on a few topics. So if you have any immediate questions, please feel free to type it in the Q&A box and we'll try to get to them as quickly as possible. So on that note, let's get started. Today, our topic is developing your care roadmap, and we're very proud to welcome our speaker who'll be discussing navigating the public and private healthcare and housing services available in BC and what things you need to plan in advance and what you do when things don't happen as expected. She is the founder of a couple different ventures in the senior living industry. In 2007, she started Home to Home, an organization that helps seniors and families with care planning, healthcare navigation, downsizing, and estate support. Her newest venture is called myCareBase. It matches families with pre-screened professional caregivers for hire in order to help seniors remain living safely at home. She has also been involved with several not-for-profit organizations, largely in the capacity of serving on boards. Some organizations include Flavors of Hope, Make-A-Wish Foundation, British Columbia and Yukon, Make-A-Wish Foundation Canada, and the Caregivers Association of BC, just to name a few. To speak on developing your care roadmap, it is my pleasure to introduce Stephanie Chan. Stephanie.
Hi, thank you so much, Donald. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come to this informative webinar. Thank you for the nice intro. And without further delay, I will just dive right into the presentation. So, all right. Okay, someone pipe up if you don't see the slides, but hopefully the slides are shown. So today, we've done the short intro on myself, and I'll talk a little more about me at the very end. But we're here to talk about elder care planning and how to build that roadmap for yourself, your spouse, your family, like whichever loved one you are trying to plan for. I'm going to discuss care planning in the context of mapping out certain things that you should consider and plan for as a certain disease or chronic condition progresses. So we're here for the ALS Society today. So I'm going to assume that all the families on this call today have a loved one with ALS. And so we're going to talk about as condition or disease progresses, what kinds of things you should think about as the care needs evolve. As part of that discussion, we're going to talk about the private and public home care services, housing, and other resources available to families in BC. And as part of planning, we're going to talk about things like powers of attorney, healthcare rep agreements, and estate planning. That falls into the area of what I call getting your legal ducks in a row. And then we'll close out with some points around how to avoid caregiver burnout. So why is planning so important? I would say the majority of people probably don't plan well enough. So by being here on this call with us today, you are taking that first step in being more prepared and thinking about these issues before a crisis arises. So planning is important because most diseases and conditions are progressive. They worsen over time, and the person afflicted with the disease or condition will have increasing care needs and become more and more dependent on those care services over time. So, if you plan ahead, it will give you a wider range of options. You'll be more prepared to make informed decisions about what services are available, what resources are available, if and when you need them. When the time comes that you need to access those services, you can make rational, informed decisions. But when I see families who don't plan, what ends up happening is they end up in an emotional crisis because they haven't planned and they haven't thought of these issues. And often then you're left with limited choices and you're making emotional decisions rather than rational decisions. So planning is really around preparing yourself and reducing that future stress that you're going to have in the future when unexpected things happen. And ultimately, it's going to lead to a better quality outcome for you and your loved one. So, what are the things that we plan around? So, when I talk to people about elder care planning, I often talk about five categories. And within these five categories, then I dive into, okay, here are the specific things that you should be thinking about. But the five categories are, okay, let's take a look at what condition or disease you have and what are the anticipated care needs that you might have coming up in the future. What is your current health state now? What are the symptoms that need to be managed? Is there chronic pain? Do you need help with certain activities of daily living? Those kind of questions. So, your care needs and your current health condition will impact the question around what is that suitable living environment for you now and in the foreseeable future. Take a look at the current home you're living in. Is it the house where you raised your kids? Or is it a condo because you've already downsized? So think about what that correct living environment is, having regard to your anticipated health and care needs. If it is still the house that you raised your kids in, maybe it's time to downsize. And when you downsize to that condo, it will allow you to better, it'll increase your ability to age in place in that condo, much easier than you can age in place in that house. It's important to understand your finances and what you can afford. I always tell people sit down with your financial planner and plan out to, age 100 and figure out with your financial planner your inflows and outflows and what you can afford for, say, home care or what you can afford if you were to move into, say, a private pay seniors residence or care home. Now is time to get your legal ducks in an order. As I mentioned, the trifecta of documents that I talk to people about. You're getting your will updated, a power of attorney, and maybe for some, a healthcare rep agreement. We have a few slides later on those legal aspects. And then lastly, we cannot forget that there are usually a team of family caregivers and other support like friends, neighbors, extended family, um, involved in the care team. And usually for the primary family caregiver, there is a real issue around burnout that happens in the moderate and advanced stage of the disease. And we can't forget to make sure that the primary family caregiver doesn't burn out so that they can continue providing quality care to their loved ones.
We have a question,
Sure.
Stephanie. What mistakes do families of fast progressing ALS patients most often regret not planning for earlier?
Some of the worst cases I see, not just with ALS, but with any kind of quickly progressing disease, is they haven't done any kind of incapacity planning for getting a power of attorney done. That would be the most important document, a will also, of course, but a power of attorney. When you don't have a power of attorney, it really sets your family up for conflict. And because there's no authorized person to make decisions and step in to do things for you. The other thing that I would say is a common mistake is people not communicating what their wishes are. And so then again, it sets the family up for conflict because the adult kids may not agree on what the best is for mom or dad. So if you are the mom or dad, you should tell your family, your substitute decision makers, how you want your decisions to be made so that they carry out your wishes when they have to step in. Okay?
Thank you. I think I have Sue Lee as well. Let me see if I think she wants to speak. Sue, can you hear us?
She's on mute.
Muted, yeah.
I asked her to unmute. Maybe she can type the answer when she's available.
Is that a question? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So with ALS and with any progressive disease, there is a medical or technical way to define the stages. But for my purposes and for planning purposes, I often think of disease progression in three stages. So you have the early stage, the moderate, and the advanced. And so what I've done here is for each stage of a disease, I've listed some suggested things to think about while you're in that stage. So let's go through each one. In the early stage of a disease, this is the stage where there's been a diagnosis, there's some processing that the family and the person who has been diagnosed is going through around just processing and adapting to this new information. There might be early symptoms being evident already. For the most part, the person is still mostly independent. They're still mobile, they can still talk, they can do the activities of daily living themselves. So, in this early stage, I would suggest that you start the research, light research, mostly self-guided research around the disease, what to expect, symptoms, and how to manage the symptoms. Um, Usually at this stage, there is some thinking around, okay, well, I want to stay home for as long as possible. I don't want to move into a care home. And so there's initial thinking about what do we have to do to age and place well in this current home? Are we going to have to downsize from a house to a condo or to a smaller home? Should we move closer to our kids so that they can become more involved? So there's this whole like start of consideration about how to age in place. Now is also a really good time to get these incapacity planning documents in place. You have to be at full mental capacity to grant a power of attorney and a healthcare rep. People with compromised mental capacity have another document that grants more limited powers, but to be able to grant the full power of attorney or healthcare rep to someone, you have to be a full sound mind. And so I suggest people do it in the early stage. As the person goes into the moderate stage of the disease, this is where the symptoms are becoming more evident and they're increasing. There might be some lifestyle adaptations. So, changes to the home. Maybe the person stops driving. Maybe there's increased help that's hired. And you may notice more medical appointments. So, this is the time where you can start thinking about okay, where can we get this extra help? This is a good time to expand the support team. So if there's kids that can be more involved in the care or doing errands or just helping out or even just visiting, neighbors, hired help, it might be a good time to think about home safety and mobility aids, making changes to the bathroom, um, removing fall hazards, improving lighting, grab bars, that kind of thing. Now is also the time to start talking to experts. So there's across the country, there's people like me who do elder care planning. There would be specialists that are associated with the medical condition or disease that you can speak with. And then, of course, your GP. In the advanced stage of a disease, so this is where someone's ability to perform the activities of daily living are really compromised. And so there, we see functional challenges, cognitive decline in some cases, mobility challenges, and higher care needs. At this stage, caregiver burnout is common. So especially if it's a spousal caregiver, this is the stage where I most commonly see the spouse just at the end of their rope, really burnt out, don't know what to do. And so at this stage, it's time to increase that home care, budget permitting, of course, and allow the substitute decision makers that you've selected to maybe start getting more involved. So if in the early stage you had actually granted someone power of attorney and healthcare rep, in this advanced stage is where they step in. For people who are living alone and don't have a spousal caregiver, even more so the case that these things need to happen. They will need more day-to-day support. absolutely the healthcare rep and the power of attorney will need to step in. And especially for people who are living alone at an advanced stage of a disease, probably the evaluation of whether they need to move into long-term care has to take place at this advanced stage if it hasn't already taken place sooner.
Sure. I do have somebody has a
Yeah.
question. What questions should we ask when interviewing caregivers as mobility is worsening to ensure they are qualified for ALS?
Oh, okay, great. So with ALS, because some of the needs are quite specific, I would actually first question, have you ever had a client with ALS? And many caregivers may have had past jobs in long-term care or maybe have had a private client with ALS. So the first thing is ask for a resume. If you're not getting any help in finding the caregiver, and let's say you're just interviewing someone that you found yourself, ask for a resume, do job background checks, and do a criminal background check. These are things that we do for clients if someone is coming to us for a caregiver. But questions to ask is tell us about your experience caring for people with ALS. Tell us about your other experience. Sometimes I like to ask people about their backgrounds, what they did before getting into home care. And you may find out that they were a nurse or a doctor even in another country. And so I find it useful for context to find out what they did. You may want to also ask them where else are they currently working. So in the normal progression of hiring private help, many people start with someone part-time and have increasing needs. And so it would be useful, for example, if you're starting with a caregiver that you're hiring for, say, 8 to 10 hours a week, ask them where else they work because you might want to know their flexibility for increasing those hours. So someone with more flexibility to increase from 8 hours to 15 or 16 hours versus someone who only has the 1 day or the 2 days and has no more available time. You might want to weigh that. Personality is a really big factor, and I think at the interview, if you can get a good sense of the fit, I think that's really important as well. Um, because skills can be learned and all these care workers are trained, but attitudes are hard to change. And so when we match people and we find good caregivers, we actually equally, in addition to experience, we look for a good attitude and responsiveness. Are they getting back to you on phone calls and texts and messages in good time? The last thing is they should have a registered care aid registry number. So the entry level certification is a program HCA, and so they should be a registered care aid. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. So I mentioned that in the early stage, there's often this kind of thinking with many people, I want to stay home for as long as possible. As this disease progresses, I don't want to move. So here I've put in some considerations for how to age in place well, and it's really around reducing your risk in your current living environment or thinking about, okay, should I move to another place where I can age in place well? But it's really minimizing the risk in these categories. Is the home safe? Is the layout safe? Are there stairs that you're going to have to navigate? Is the bathroom safe? Can a wheelchair eventually fit in the bathroom when needed? Is the lighting good? Are there any fall hazards in the home? Should I start using a walker or wheelchair inside? Medication compliance for people who live alone. The family might be nervous about whether the person's taking their meds. And so there's ways to help with medication compliance. There's automatic pill dispensers and there's blister packs that you can get from the pharmacy. Does the person need help with the activities of daily living? So all the personal hygiene, toileting, dressing, bathing, or showering, as well as like the daily activities around the house, cooking, cleaning. What are the tasks that the person needs help with? Eventually, the person is no longer going to drive. So, how are they going to get to appointments? Who's going to go with them? We know that isolation is now a risk factor for a whole bunch of other conditions. And so, especially if that person lives alone, I would pay attention to, are they having regular socialization opportunities? Are they having regular connection to family and friends? Um, where in cases where there's cognitive decline, there'll be a need for increasing support for some of those daily activities and decision making. Most people who are committed to staying at home will need home care at some point. And there's a few different ways to get home care. As many of you probably already know, there's home care provided by Fraser Health and Vancouver Coastal Health, and there's a way to hire a private caregiver. So the public health authorities, and then there's a few different ways to find a caregiver privately. The most informal way is word of mouth, and that's the cheapest way as well. So your neighbor or your family or a friend or someone you know from church knows of a caregiver that has worked for them, and maybe this caregiver now has free time. So that would be word of mouth, where you're getting someone you trust. And then there are home care agencies that there's plenty of ads for home care agencies. Comfort Keepers, Nurse Next Door, Bayshore, Home Instead. They're all home care agencies. And what they do is they employ the caregivers, make sure they're trained and vetted. The caregivers work for them and they get assigned the client. And so your contract is with the care agency who will send people. Hourly rates right now range from, I'm going to say about $40 to $55, depending on where you live and the agency. And then as a hybrid, there's these kind of care matching platforms that where you can take the initiative to find someone, but they're vetted. And there's some safety parameters around finding a caregiver. Like a placement agency would send you candidates, and you can choose the one that you want, and then you hire that person directly. The differences between the subsidized home care and the private home care largely is around costs, what they'll do, like the scope of the tasks that they'll help with, and the duration of visits. And the way you access them is different. So if you are looking to explore what Fraser Health or Vancouver Coastal Health can do, you would contact them and ask for an assessment for home care. A case manager will come and talk to you about your needs. And if you are deemed eligible, meaning they believe you do need help with certain tasks, then they will put you on the list for community care. The scope of what the health authorities will do is limited to personal care, including medications, dressing, toileting, wound care. But they will not come clean your house. They're not going to do errands. They're not going to walk your dog or cook. They might heat up a meal, but they're not going to cook. And they usually come in for less than an hour and then they leave when their task is done. Conversely, private home care is the opposite. So there'll be 3 hour minimums usually, and some agencies have a weekly minimum. You'll pay a lot more than you would for subsidized home care. Subsidized home care is assessed based on your income. So the health authorities have a formula that they apply. But with private home care, you can basically ask a private caregiver to do anything. You can ask them to drive you places. They can do errands. They can do grocery shopping. They can clean, laundry, walk the dog. Really, anything is possible with private home care. So I talked about this already. The one drawback I hear from everybody about the subsidized home care services from the health authorities is that you don't know that it's going to be the same person. And in fact, it's most likely not the same person every day. And They cannot guarantee that. That's not how they book or schedule people. So, unfortunately, as you can imagine, it's quite disruptive to not know who's going to be at the door and that they really are from Vancouver Coastal Health or Fraser Health. So that's the biggest complaint I hear from my clients who have public home care services is it's not the same person and they're often late. With private home care, as I mentioned, you can ask them to do anything you'd like, but it is more expensive. So there's that to factor in, and it may not be affordable for everyone. And then there's a certain level of management when you have private home care that you don't with the public system. So it is a bit of give and take. For the most part, if your budget permits, it is worth it to get private home care for the expanded scope of the tasks, as well as you know that there's a consistent person. It's the same person coming every time.
Stephanie,
Yeah.
somebody has a question. Will extended disability coverage pay for private care services?
I don't think so, but that's up to your plan. I'm not familiar with every insurance plan, but so there's something called long-term care insurance, and that will pay for home care. But your typical extended health from your employer, like your benefits plan from your ex-employer, probably not, but there are some exceptions. So if there's veterans benefits, that pays for home care. And if you have something called long-term care insurance. Aside from those, then you would have to actually look into the terms of your insurance policy or just call the plan administrator and ask.
Okay, there's another question. When ALS progression is happening quickly and mobility is very challenged, is it advised to be in a private facility when advanced care is needed?
I would say that would depend on the level of support that's in the house. So if the person is alone, absolutely. I would recommend, all things being equal and not knowing the other details, the person lives alone. And as ALS progresses, I think that person is safer in a more controlled care home environment. If there's a spousal caregiver, I think there's certain things to monitor. The cost, actually, this dovetails into what I'm about to say. The cost of private home care can get very, very, very expensive. And so there might come a time when it becomes more affordable to just move. And the layout of the home might not be safe, depending on whether there's stairs or what the home is like. The spousal caregiver might be just so burnt out. We see this all the time. There's there's such a high degree of burnout that the family sees no other option than to move their loved one to long-term care. And so if you can get ahead of that and know that the burnout could be coming, then I would encourage everyone to be proactive and try to do things to avoid burnout. So get help and make lifestyle changes before you feel it needs to happen. And sometimes we see cases where a move occurs so that the adult kids are closer and they can be more involved in the parents' care. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, I don't see it anything right now. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So when home care is not enough and you do start thinking, oh, are we better off just moving? There's a few categories of seniors residences. Seniors residences are characterized by the level of care provided in that residence. So there's this first category called independent and supportive living, where these are places like Gilmore Gardens in Richmond, um, some of the Carlton Gardens in Chartwell Carlton in Burnaby. So it's independent living, but with meals, recreation, and housekeeping and concierge. So there's all these support services that make it easier. For people with ALS, you're generally going to be looking at either assisted living or complex care. If you've already tried aging in place at home and you're at the point where you don't feel like home care can work anymore, most people are going to fall right away into looking at care homes where there's round the clock care. It's not limited to certain tasks. It's all the nursing care that you need. almost like on demand as you need it throughout the day. So if you need help with transfers, incontinence care, feeding assistance, whatever the care needs are, we have private pay care homes and subsidized care homes, which I will go to in a second. For couples that are in this dilemma where one person has ALS, but the other one is quite still independent, you have this dilemma of whether you need to live apart. So there are these residences called campus of care where it's a community that offers all the different levels. And so the good thing about these communities is that the more independent spouse can live on the independent side. The person with ALS can live in the care wing and they can still see each other every day. They won't be sleeping in the same room, but it allows them to basically still be together because you can still spend most of the day together. And so we have seen that these sometimes work to keep couples together where one is still relatively independent. When we think about moving across all the clients that we've helped, I do see that most people are quite overwhelmed with the thought of moving. It's very traumatic and it's very emotional. So when the time comes and you find this yourself in this situation where you just don't know where to start, I would suggest that you think about, okay, what is your budget? Um, can you afford a private pay care home, or do you want to access the publicly subsidized care home channel? What part of the city do you want to live in? And do you want to be closer to family? So thinking about the care needs, the budget and location and family members will hopefully guide you to come up with a natural short list of places. Then once you have that short list, and by the way, the health authorities publish a list of all the long-term care facilities, public and private. So once you have a short list of the places, I suggest you tour at least 3. And I can talk to you separately about what questions to ask and what to look for. But after you tour a few, you'll get a sense of which one might be the right fit for you. And then, depending on whether you're accessing subsidized or private pay, there might be wait lists, there might be an application process. The wait list for the public sector care homes is much longer than the wait list for private pay care homes. But there's definitely a process to access each. With the public care homes, you're paying a percentage of net income up to a maximum of roughly about $4,000 a month. And so the big pro is that you're paying a lot less than you would for a private pay care home. However, you don't have as much control over the timing. When your name comes up in the system, you have to take that spot. And while you can state preferences for where you'd like to be placed or moved to, it may not always be the case that you can go there. They might be full and you might need to move to be able to access the care that you need. So you might be placed in a home that is not your preferred, and then you can go on a transfer list. Some care homes have shared rooms. They're not all single rooms. And the wait lists right now, I would say, are at least a year and a half and maybe up to 2 years. Unless you're in a very urgent situation where, you're in hospital and there's nobody at home and you can't go home without care. So there are circumstances where you can be placed on an emergency placement list. In the private pay sector, the wait lists are a little bit shorter. It's often a function of timing and luck that you may find some residences with immediate availability. Some that have wait lists might be a few months, up to a year, but generally they are shorter than in the public system. Private pay rates can get very expensive, and for a majority of people, they might not even be able to afford it at all. Many people will sell their house if you own a house and have enough to pay for that private pay care home. But the benefit of the private care homes is that you do have absolute control over when you want to move and where you want to move to. because you're picking the place that you want to move to and you're contracting with them directly. I do think on average, there is a little bit of difference in the quality of the recreation, food, and ambiance in the environment of a private pay care home. And so if budget permitting, I often tell people it is worth evaluating and looking at despite it being so much more expensive. To access a subsidized care home, you don't deal with the residents directly like you would through the public system. You would go through the Fraser Health or Vancouver Coastal Health. They'll do an assessment and they'll look at whether you've exhausted home care. And then you can be put on the wait list for the first available bed when your name comes up. Okay, we're going to move now to one of the things that I said you should do at the early stage, which is thinking about your substitute decision makers. So, advanced planning involves discussing and preparing for your future decisions when you become seriously ill or unable to communicate your wishes. So, part of the whole advanced planning exercise is around thinking about what your wishes are, recording them, and communicating them to your substitute decision makers. And you need to do this when you still have mental capacity. So, in advanced planning, we have certain tools. So, on the left-hand side, in capacity planning, these are the tools that have effect while you're still alive. And then the will and trusts and life insurance are things and tools that pop up and have effect after your death. They're mutually exclusive in the sense that if you have someone designated as your executor under your will, they are not your power of attorney. They do not have any authority to make decisions for you while you're still alive. Many people appoint the same person, but you don't need to. So while you're alive and you're thinking about incapacity planning, the two main documents are the power of attorney. That's where someone steps in and make legal and financial decisions for you, and a healthcare rep agreement. And this is where someone makes healthcare decisions for you. It does make sense if every family's dynamics are different, but it does make sense if you can appoint the same person as the power of attorney and the healthcare rep. It makes things a lot easier. Sometimes it's not possible, and that's okay. I highly recommend that you think about appointing more than one person so that there's a backup. Same goes for the executor under a will.
We have a question from Asimina.
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
She just has to mute. I'm not sure if she's.
Are you talking about me? Sorry,
Yes, we can hear you now.
I didn't have a question.
Oh, you don't
Sure.
have a question. That's okay.
No,
Okay. Okay, no problem.
thank you.
Sure, no problem. So when you think about who to select, and I don't know who in the group has a power of attorney and not, or a healthcare rep, but for those that are, want to update it or just think about if they've chosen the right person, most people, I would say, choose a family member. But if you don't have a family member or they live very far away and practically can't really step into the role very well, you can appoint anybody to be a power of attorney. There's no legal impediments to appointing a neighbor or a friend. And then as a third option, you can appoint a professional as a power of attorney. So the trust companies that are associated with the major banks, so Royal Trust, BMO Trust, Scotia Trust, as well as independent trust companies, they can act as power of attorney for you, as well as certain lawyers could be willing to act as a power of attorney as well. So the main difference is the level of formality, I would say, is the main difference. When you hire a third party to be a power of attorney, there's a certain continuity that you can rely on in that unless you feel like Royal Trust or BMO Trust might disappear one day, but I don't think so. You know that they will exist at the time that you need the help. When you appoint somebody, and we have seen this where people appoint powers of attorney who are the same age as them, please do not do that. Appoint someone younger. We've seen cases where someone has appointed a friend or a neighbor, and when the time comes that they need help, that person is not in a state to do it because they have their own health issues by that time as well. So always appoint someone younger. I would suggest always appoint an alternate so that you have a backup, or you have two people who can each act as power of attorney. So let's say one person is out of town, the other person can step in. Some considerations to keep in mind. First and foremost, it should be someone you trust. So that's why I think most people do appoint a family member. Do their values align with yours? Would they make decisions the way that you would? Are they close geographically? So a lot of the tasks involved in being a power of attorney and healthcare rep are a lot easier if they live in the same city. Do they have the time to step into this role when needed? Acting as a power of attorney can sometimes feel like a part-time job. There sometimes can be a lot to do in that role. So you want to look for someone with the right skills. Are they good communicators? Are they good decision makers? Do they perform well under pressure? Are they good multitaskers? Are they organized? Because a power of attorney is responsible for things like paying your bills, filing your tax return, making sure your home insurance is renewed, making sure your bills are paid. And they have to keep organized records of everything that they're doing for you. They have to act honestly and in good faith. They cannot change your will. And a power of attorney, unless they're also designated as a healthcare rep, cannot make medical decisions for you.
There's a question there. What are the
Sure.
most important sensitive decisions we should prioritize in the next 1 to 3 months for progressive ALS?
Oh, well, that's a really broad question. So, priorities, I would say, is do you have the care that you need now and in the anticipated near future? Do you need to get a head start on figuring out where you're going to get care or support when you need it? The second is get your finances in order and know what you can afford if you need to hire help or if you need to move. I cannot speak to anything medical in terms of healthcare priorities in managing symptoms or managing the ALS. I'm not an expert in that. I can only talk about kind of these planning issues. So I would say, think about your anticipated care needs. Are you in the right living environment? And getting your legal and financial affairs in order. Okay?
Thank you.
Yep. So just finishing up powers of attorney, you'll get a copy of this presentation. I'll send it to Alexandra to distribute to all of you. But this is a list of the things that you don't necessarily need to give. Like, let's say you've appointed your daughter as your power of attorney. You don't need to give her a list of all your accounts and passwords right now, but they need to be organized in a spot where she knows where to look if she has to step in. So my father, for example, has appointed me and my brother. I don't have all this information right now. I have none of it as it relates to my parents. But what my dad has told me is everything I need to know is in a certain spot in the house. So I know where to go if something happens and he's hospitalized and I need to go find information. So that's one way of doing it because a lot of people don't want to give out this information right away, but then we see powers of attorney who have no idea what their parents' situation is. They have no idea where the accounts are. They have no idea what accountant was used to file the tax return. And so it puts the children in crisis. Okay. And just wrapping up, we're about to sum up and wrap up here. don't forget the primary family caregiver, and often it's the spouse. Sometimes it's the adult kids, and they're balancing full-time work and caring for aging parents, and sometimes it's both spousal and kids involved in the care. And something to keep in mind for those of you on the call who are the family caregivers, don't be scared and don't feel guilty about setting boundaries. It is okay to say no. It is okay to not do everything yourself. It is perfectly normal to ask for help. And in fact, asking for help is an acknowledgement that you understand that help is needed to enable your loved one to continue getting the quality care they need. So we call it share the care, ask for help, talk to experts, ask people for referrals to other services, and don't forget to take breaks. So often people who are a little bit resistant to getting regular care are sometimes more open to getting part-time care for respite, so that what's important is for the family caregiver to continue doing the things that give them joy so that they can get breaks. And it gives them it lets them restore and refresh so that they can continue providing the primary care to their loved one. I also encourage everyone, if forget everything else in this presentation, to really adopt a proactive attitude, because being proactive and just even thinking and talking to your family about these issues is going to put you so far ahead of the curve in being able to react well when crisis occurs, when unexpected things happen. You'll be able to make informed decisions and achieve a better quality outcome for you and your loved one. I invite any of you to follow up with me for a one-on-one consult if you need. I do offer seminar attendees complimentary one-on-one phone or Zoom consults. So between my two businesses, Home to Home can help with diving into further building out this care roadmap for yourself and planning out things like, okay, what are some of the seniors residences I should look at? What are some things I should consider? Who can I go to get this power of attorney done? And then if some of you do find yourself moving, we have a whole downsizing team and we can help with the move. My other company, myCareBase, is a platform to help you find in-home care. So if you do want to hire that caregiver, but you don't want to do the legwork in vetting them, checking for background or job references, we do all that and we can match you with a really great caregiver. And that is the end of the presentation. I'll open it up for any last questions.
Maybe as we wait for potentially some to roll in. Thank you, Stephanie. What a great presentation on just, it seems like common sense stuff, but I'm sure it's so much stuff that people often overlook and things that you don't consider when looking for care. Yeah, very informative. And, Stephanie does have her contact information on the screen right now. A great resource for us and a great supporter of us, and certainly very generous to offer that free consultation. Please do connect with her. She is terrific at what she does.
Thank you.
And while we continue to potentially wait for any questions, maybe I'll just take this opportunity to, obviously thank everybody for attending. And we do these every second Tuesday of the month if there's no holidays interrupting. But our next presentation is going to be on Tuesday, January 13th at 1 p.m. A very celebrated researcher in ALS. Her name is Dr. Heather Durham. She had spent the majority of her career at McGill University, but we're very fortunate to have had Dr. Durham retire in Victoria. So she is now considered a BC resident. So we're excited to have Dr. Durham present on the 13th of January at 1 p.m. So please make sure you join us for that. Her topic is going to be cellular defense mechanisms in ALS. So very interesting topic and Q&A session where we can pick her brain on some research initiatives and some of the stuff that's happening throughout Canada, because she is very knowledgeable. I don't see a question, but I do see a thank you, Stephanie, very informative. Glad we have most covered off already. Yeah. So Stephanie, you're obviously Vancouver-based. We were talking about earlier.
Yeah. I am Vancouver-based, and We cover all of Greater Vancouver, and myCareBase covers all of BC. And so wherever you are, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Even if you just want a sounding board for future planning or any immediate needs. Most people who want to age in place at home, there's a certain level of kind of management and costs to be able to age in place at home. And so we can help you plan around that.
Amazing. I don't see any more questions, so maybe that's a cue that you have filled everybody's brain with so much knowledge and information that they're going to go and just another thank you. Alexandra, thank you for fielding the Q&A sessions and the raised hands. Is there anything that you wanted to add as well?
No, everything is all good. I was checking an email that I just received that it had some questions, but you, Stephanie, addressed all of them. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Stephanie. That was terrific, and
Thank you.
awesome to have you be a part of our patient webinar series. And thank you for all those that joined us, and happy holidays. This is sort of our last presentation, of course, before the holidays. So on behalf of ALS BC, wanted to wish everybody a happy, safe holidays, and looking forward to seeing you in 2026.
Happy holidays, everyone.